Treasure of Knowledge, Ilmi Khazana, Part 1, by Allama Nasiruddin Nasir Hunzai, Sitare Imtiaz. Translated from Urdu into English by Azim Ali Lakhani. Edited by Fakir Muhammad Hunzai and Rashida Nur Muhammad Hunzai. Published by Institute for Spiritual Wisdom and Luminous Science. Foreword. Infinite and boundless gratitude to God, the everlasting Qayyum, the omnipotent Qadir, for He accepts the insignificant service for knowledge from humble servants like us. Even if we prostrate till our last breath in gratitude to the Lord of the world for this huge bounty and great favor, the smallest fraction of the debt would not be repaid. It is evident from the name 5 articles, Banj Makala, that this book is just a collection of 5 essays. But in my opinion, each topic in this book is extremely important, beneficial, wisdom-filled, and comprehensive. For this reason, it would not be wrong to say that each article is a huge book in its own right. However, it is the readers who by their comments determine the value and worth of the book. The first article in the book, Banj Makala Part 1, speaks about the realities and recognitions of the great names of God, Asma'ul Husna, in the light of the Holy Quran. In this article, answers to thousands of questions are present and available for those moments who possess intellect and knowledge, and use rectitude and guidance. It is so because when it is accepted that the supreme name of God is present as the perfect man among the people of the world, then many logical conclusions can be drawn and numerous problems can be solved. The second article is The Rope of God, which is a Tawili subject of the Holy Quran, and with the help of its wisdoms which are explained here, many realities of glorious Quran can become clear, provided divine help and guidance are received. The third article is piety, and its importance is that it is the essence of all Islamic worship and matters. It is true that piety has been of prime importance and is required from the very beginning, i.e., the purpose of piety was addressed in the invitations and the shariats of all the prophets. Thus, writing on this topic and placing it here in this book was extremely necessary. The fourth article is The Philosophy of Belief. It is required because most of the people of the world do not understand the importance of belief, and due to this reason, they have gone far outside the circle of religion and are roaming in the desert of atheism. Today, they have lost the peace of heart and the hope for tomorrow. Due to this great universal danger, it is incumbent upon every true moment to understand some fundamental concepts of the philosophy of belief. The fifth article is Fundamental Realities of Islam, in which 40 important points are mentioned, and in my opinion, each point comprises multiple answers for the wise people, provided that they ponder and reflect upon them. This is so because the essence of meaning and purport is obtained only by pondering and reflecting. After this short introduction, I must record my gratitude to all knowledge-nurturing people for the diverse support they have rendered. These people live in different places of the Ismaili world. Their far-reaching eyes greatly value knowledge, and they always strive hard to spread the light of knowledge. The food for their souls and intellects is knowledge, recognition, zikr, and worship. Their most favorite hobby is to study religious books, and by doing so, they enhance the repository of their religious knowledge day by day. In this way, their spiritual progress is assured. All their doubts have vanished, and as a result, they receive divine mercies and blessings day and night. Humble servant Nasiruddin Nasir Hunzai, Sunday, 6th Ramazan, 1397 AH, 21st August 1977. The Great Names of God. Number 1. Quote, "And to God belong the beautiful names, Al-Asma'ul Husna. So call on Him by them." Unquote. Surah 7, Ayat 180. Number 2. Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, alayhi salam, has said, quote, "We, the Imams, are the beautiful names of God, and without our recognition, no person's deeds will be accepted." Unquote. Number 3. Here it becomes evident that God's names are of two kinds: verbal names and luminous names. God's luminous names, or His great names, are the pure Imams through whom we are commanded to invoke Him. Number 4. In the light of the above-mentioned Quranic verse, Surah 7, Ayat 180, remember that the supreme name of God, whose recognition is essential with respect to the time and age, is the Imam of the time. Number 5. There is no classification in God's essence and attributes, because He is one in all respects. However, the difference lies in expressing and explaining His attributes through different meanings and things. Moreover, the requirements of space and time are also taken into consideration. Number 6. Thus, compared to the verbal names, the luminous names of God are His great names, Asma-i-Izam, who are the prophets and the Imams. In this context, the Imam of the time is God's supreme name, Ism-i-Azam, in the present time. Number 7. This shows that some names of God are silent, Samit, and some are speaking, Natik, and the speaking names are those who guide and give salvation. Number 8. The divine throne is living. The divine pen is living. The divine pedestal is living, and so is the divine tablet. In short, everything that belongs to God is living, speaking, and rational, because the example used for God is supreme. Such as when it is said, God's hand, it is an example, and it is supreme in the sense that the Prophet and the Imam are designated as God's hand. Similarly, God's face also symbolizes the same reality, i.e., Prophet and Imam. Number 9. In the light of the above-mentioned words, who can benefit from the supreme name of God? Can it be accessible to all or not? Number 10. What does it mean when God says, "Call God by His beautiful names"? Does it mean that whoever does not recognize His real name will be ignored? Number 11. Is it true that the Prophet and the Imam are the real names of God? Therefore, He should be called through them, and recourse should not be taken to Him through them? Number 12. It is true that God's supreme name and God's vicegerent cannot be two separate things. Had it been so, both these ranks would have been incomplete and imperfect. That is, the supreme name would not have the attributes of God's vicegerency, and his vicegerent would not have been his supreme name. Number 13. How logical is the point that the prophet and imam of the time, who can be God's vicegerent, can also be his supreme name. Further, since his vicegerency is possible, then the vicegerency of his names is even more so. Number 14. From the time of Hazrat Adam's alayhi salam appointment as the divine vicegerent, this magnificent office continues in the holy chain of the prophets and the imams. It has never been mentioned that God's vicegerency is the responsibility of the heavenly book, or of the house of God, Baytullah, or that one of the angels in God's vicegerent. Thus, it is evident that the office of vicegerency is not separate from prophethood and imamate. Hence, the perfect man, who sometimes manifests as a prophet and sometimes as an imam, is also the supreme name of God. The rope of God. Among all the wisdom-filled examples which Allah mentions in the wise Quran, a very beautiful and extremely comprehensive example is the divine rope, Hablullah. Certainly, the reality, Mamsul, of this symbol, Misal, is the divine light of guidance present from pre-eternity, Azal, and is guiding the people of the world by manifesting itself in the holy chain of the noble prophets and the glorious imams. Thus, here, with the help of God, we present some of the realities and recognitions of this luminous rope. There are many verses in the noble Quran which urge to seek the means of divine closeness and to hold God firmly. Also, there is a verse which says, quote, "And hold fast, all of you together, to the rope of Allah, and do not be divided," unquote. Surah 3, Ayat 103. This divine command makes it evident to the people of wisdom that this noble verse regarding the divine rope represents and elucidates all those holy verses in which it is emphatically ordered to be attached to divine guidance, to get closer to it, and to hold it firmly. If God could be found without any means, and if his holy hem could be touched directly, it would not have been commanded to hold his rope, and the need of a true guide and guidance on the true path would not have been required. Thus, it becomes very clear that this wisdom-filled verse regarding Allah's rope possesses prime importance. Hence, wise people must reflect on its wisdoms. Wisdom 1. God has used a rope to symbolize the chain of the light of guidance, which implies that the chain of divine guidance is established and continuing from pre-eternity, Azal, to post-eternity, Abad. Its one end is in the hand of God, and the other is among the people, or we can say that the rope of divine guidance exists in the form of a circle between pre-eternity, Azal, and post-eternity, Abad, and between the higher world, Alam-i-Ulvi, and the lower world, Alam-i-Sufli, and it always manifests itself in this world in the personality of the Imam of the time. Wisdom 2. This world, which is the lower world, Alam-i-Sufli, is like a narrow and dark well in comparison to the higher world, Ulwi. People should hold fast to the rope of divine guidance so that they can be spiritually and luminously lifted up and taken to the bright atmosphere of the angelic world, Malakut, similar to the worldly example of a rope being used when a person falls into a deep well. Wisdom 3. According to the law of nature, it is possible that in spite of being present among them, some people do not grip to the divine rope. It is also possible that some people hold it loosely, and there is also the possibility that some people hold it initially, and then suddenly they leave it and get separated, and such is the real case. Allah knew this, and that is why He said, وَأَتَّصِمُوا, hold fast, not lightly, bihablillah, to the rope of Allah, i.e., the chain of light of guidance. Jamia, all of you together, i.e., not separately. Wala tafarraku, and do not get divided into sects, i.e., if you all do not hold to the rope of the light of guidance together, you will have sectarianism. Complete guidance regarding adherence to the rope of God is present in this command of Allah. Wisdom 4. According to this verse about the divine rope, disunity and sectarianism were utterly prohibited in Islam. The emphatic nature of this command is evident from its context. The purport is that disunity and differences at any place in religion, whether it is in the community or the Jamaat, in a religious institution or in the thoughts of a moment, is a big loss. Therefore, this fundamental guidance prohibits it, and it is ordered to prevent it by holding fast to God's rope. Wisdom 5. It is as necessary for the rope of divine guidance to reach every person as it is to be present and manifest in every period. Certainly, it can reach every person in the form of guidance and command, Amru Farman, so that in this way every person has access to the divine rope, and it becomes possible for them to follow God's commands. Wisdom 6. A rope has some components, therefore. One part of the divine rope is the spirit and spirituality of the Quran, which is also known as reality, hakikat, wisdom, hikmat, and esoteric meaning, ta'wil. And the second part is the light of the Imam. A physical rope is a material object, hence, its different parts could be separated from each other. The rope of religion, however, is spiritual and luminous. Therefore, its parts are so united that they cannot be separated. Wisdom 7. God says, quote, "But how can you disbelieve while it is you to whom the verses of Allah are recited, and among you is His messenger? And whoever holds fast to Allah is surely guided to the right path." Unquote. Surah 3, Ayat 101. From this verse, it is evident that during the Prophet's time, holding to God, i.e., God's rope, and to guide on the straight path was possible only through the sublime teachings of religious harmony and unity which the Prophet used to impart to the Muslims and the Mu'mins by the command of God. Thus, the Prophet himself had the status of the divine rope in his time. Wisdom 8. After Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, Maulana Ali alayhi salam, and each of the true Imams from his children is God's pure robe in his time. This divine robe will continue to remain present in the world forever, so that the means of unity and salvation remains available for the people of religion and faith. Wisdom 9. Having listened to and understanding God's command that all of us together should hold fast to his rope and not become separated, it becomes unacceptable that the Quran, Islam, Prophet, and Imam are separate entities, and that only one among these is God's robe, and the others are not. Rather, the very purport of this saying is that God's things are already united. Thus, people too should unite, because this blessed command teaches that the ranks of religion should be considered close to each other, and that the human powers of faith should be united so that religious unity, centrality, and brotherhood are established. Wisdom 10. The reality of the rope of God, Hablullah, as mentioned earlier, is the chain of guidance, which is the chain of the light of guidance of the prophets and the Imams. It means that the light of God and Prophet, whose manifestation is the Imam of the time, is the divine rope, and following his guidance means to hold fast to it. Wisdom 11. The Imam of the time, who is the firm rope of God, is also the true guide and the straight path, because the final reality, Mamsul, and the meaning of all these examples is one, and different examples of this one reality are mentioned, Surah 17, Ayat 89, in the entire Quran. Wisdom 12. The Imam of the time is the pure rope of God, because he is the true vicegerent and the representative of God and the Prophet. Thus, to give allegiance to the Imam, to obey him, and to have love for him are indeed holding fast to God's rope. Wisdom 13. Despite the fact that God's sublime glory is far beyond the reach of feeble human beings, his command to together hold fast to him, and then his explaining this as together holding fast to his rope, is his unique blessing, because this verse mentions the representation of God's extreme proximity. Wisdom 14. According to this command of Allah, when a person holds fast to God's rope, it means that he holds to God and truly designates him as his guide and advocate. In such a case, this person is liberated from worrying about what to think, what to say, and what to do in religious matters, because he has embraced God as his guide and advocate, and in this example he is very near to God. Rather, God is with him. Wisdom 15. It is impossible that people possessing different attitudes and thinking can unite without a means and a center of unity, harmony, and centrality. Therefore, there is a means and a center for religious and national unity and oneness, and that is the divine rope, Hablullah, and leaving it will result in disharmony among the people of religion. May God help us to understand the truth. Note: for more information on this topic, please refer to the Holy Quran Especially the study of following verses is essential. Surah 3, Ayat 101, Surah 3, Ayat 103, Surah 4, Ayat 146, Surah 4, Ayat 175, and Surah 22, Ayat 78. Piety, taqwa. Piety is the spirit and essence of all worship and matters in Islam. No word or deed is accepted in the divine court without piety, because God does not value words and deeds which are devoid of the essence of piety. Piety means righteousness, fear of God, and to refrain from all types of sins. Thus, the standard of piety is common for ordinary people and special for chosen people. Or we can say that piety has many stages, at the top of which there is a perfect rank, which is the characteristic of prophets and imams. The initial stages of piety are within the confines of intention. Its intermediate stages are related to speech, and the final stages relate to actions. This means that the foundation of piety starts with the state and intention of the heart, and passing through different stages of thought, it enters the stage of words, and finally it enters the field of actions. This shows that the foundation and center of piety is in the human heart, as the wise Quran says, quote, "Those are they whose hearts Allah has tested for piety," unquote. Surah 49, Ayat 3. And again, quote, "And whoever respects the signs of Allah, this surely is the outcome of the piety of hearts," unquote. Surah 22, Ayat 32. The purport of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam statement that deeds depend on intentions is tantamount to saying that without the right intention, no deed can be correct, and right intention is impossible without the righteousness of heart. Thus, the fundamental obligation becomes incumbent upon a faithful servant to form a habit of having good intentions, nek niyat, which can only be done through the righteousness of heart. It is clear from the stories of the Quranic prophets that piety is the soul of their missions, and there is no shariat among their different laws, sharai, in which piety is not given prime importance. Rather, its need and importance is such that it was established as a universal kuliya in the shariat of the first prophet Adam alayhi salam, that, quote, he said, "Allah only accepts from those who are righteous," unquote. Surah 5, Ayat 27. The vastness of the meaning of piety and its value is clearly elucidated by the Quranic reality, in which it is said, quote, "O people, verily, we have created you from a male and a female, and made you nations and tribes, so that you may recognize each other. Verily, the most honored of you with Allah is the one who is the most righteous, atqakum. Verily, Allah is knower, aware," unquote. Surah 49, Ayat 13. This noble verse shows that, on the one hand, the attribute of piety is inevitable in faith, religion, and for humanity. Every human being should be at one or the other stage of piety, because the above verse is addressed to the world of humanity from the time of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam till the resurrection, and no person is exempted from this challenge of practicing piety. From another aspect, piety, which due to being common amongst ordinary people and special in the chosen ones, is a human attribute common to all human beings. This is the reason why piety is considered the prerequisite for the collective human honor. In contrast to this, the prerequisite for special esteem is wisdom, and wisdom is that universal good, khair kul, in which a world of goodness and well-being is encompassed, and piety is also included in it. In the meaning of piety as fear of God, a faithful servant should fear the divine law in his heart, which can only be in the form of complete obedience. It is obvious that every person obeys the divine law to some extent according to his faith or concept. This is a bright proof that the fear of God is common amongst people. Where piety means righteousness, it also has the same meaning, that is, to refrain from those thoughts, words, and deeds which are prohibited, haram, and to protect oneself from God's disobedience. This is the meaning of piety. If we limit ourselves to the word taqwa, in studying the Quran, we will find more than 250 verses on this subject. And if we consider the wider meaning of piety, then no verse will be devoid of this topic. This same principle of oneness of meaning, wahdat-e-manawi, of the Quran is applicable to other topics as well. Thus, an example of the universality and comprehensiveness of piety is that Allah says, quote, "O you who believe, save yourselves and your families from the fire." Unquote. Surah 66, Ayat 6. It is evident that this command, save, qul, is directly linked to piety, and it is also obvious that the only way to avoid hell is to obey God as mentioned in the Quran. However, this obedience of God is such that it becomes incumbent to act upon all the orders of God, the Prophet, and the custodians of the divine command, Sahibane Amr. This shows that piety, taqwa, is among the comprehensive words of the wise Quran, and all the religious commands are included in its purport. At the beginning of the third ruku of Surah Araf, it is said that piety is the best attire of a momin's soul, which means that the spiritual characteristic of piety acts as an attire for the soul. O children of Adam, alayhi salam, we have sent down to you a garment to cover your shameful parts, and garments of adornment, and the garment of piety. Libasut taqwa is best. Surah 7, Ayat 26. Thus, it should always be remembered that when a person sees himself naked or wearing torn clothes in a dream, he should understand this spiritual signal that he has become the victim of religious impiety. Contrary to this, if he sees himself in fine clothes in the world of dream, or in the luminous world of imagination, it means that his piety is symbolized by the fine clothing. Several verses of the Holy Quran state that God befriends those who are pious. It means that Allah loves those who are righteous. A person who considers himself pious can ascertain the immediate result of piety in this world within himself by checking if he has love for God, or if there exists any such attraction which always or sometimes draws his attention to the remembrance of God. God's friendship and his love is not a silent and static thing without any influence and attraction. Rather, it is a living reality which gives a human being the strength and zeal to obey God, as it is mentioned in the verses regarding God's love. The Holy Quran also says that God is with the pious people, which means that as a result of piety, the vicious characteristics and satanic insinuations of his servant perish, and in its place manifest the attributes of the compassionate. Sifate Rahmaniya. A heart in which God's attributes manifest contains everything, and this is the meaning of God being with someone. The wise Quran mentions that to forgive and to be just is very close to piety. This shows that piety is superior to forgiveness and justice, even though they are among the special attributes of a human being. According to Surah Araf, verse 128, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, and the good end is only for the righteous ones. It is essential to know that akibat means results, which are at least four. Two of them belong to the collective state of people, and two belong to their individual state. It is in this way that from one aspect, the end result of all the people of the world is the hereafter, and from the other aspect, it is the ultimate epoch, Akhir Zamana. Likewise, individually, from one aspect, the last period of every person's life is his result, and from another, the immediate result of every deed is its end. Here, the reality becomes very clear that the reward of Akibat for the pious people is in that not only will they be prosperous in the hereafter and in the ultimate epoch, but they will also be very happy in the last period of their lives, as well as after performing every good deed. Verse 67 of Surah Zukhruf says, quote, "Friends on that day will be foes one to another, save the righteous ones." Unquote. Its reality is that all the friendships which are based on worldly objectives will become enmity, but those friendships which are established by the pious people in relation to God, the Prophet, and the true Awliya, will endure and will obviously be beneficial. Allah says in verse 197 of Surah Al-Baqarah, quote, "And whatever good you do, Allah knows it, and make provision, for surely the best of provisions is piety." Unquote. Here, it becomes known that generally every good deed, and especially piety, provides the provision for the path of spirituality, Rah-e Ruhaniyat, and for the stage of the hereafter, manzile akhirat. Thus, one should know that moments who are keen to progress spiritually, if in spite of performing many good deeds are unable to do so, certainly it is due to not having the best provision of the path of spirituality, i.e., piety. None of the 7 pillars of Islam, i.e., walayat, taharat, salat, zakat, Sawm, Hajj, and Jihad is without the purpose of piety. And if we read the Quranic verses and the prophetic traditions, ahadith nabawi, related to them, we will know that their prime objective, origin, and foundation is piety. Since man is a collection of 3 things, namely, body, soul, and intellect, piety and fear of God also has 3 stages, namely, physical piety, spiritual piety, and intellectual piety, and the highest rank is that of intellectual piety, regarding which the wise Quran says, quote, "And among the servants it is the ulama, who truly fear God," unquote. Surah 35, Ayat 28. It is evident that the highest rank of piety is impossible without wisdom and recognition, marifat. It should be known that recognition of God is attainable only through the intellect, knowledge, and wisdom. Moreover, piety and fear of God can only be understood through them. It is only then that one can differentiate between innumerable concepts and beliefs, and can choose some and refrain from others, so that the heart and mind can become free from the contamination of ignorance, falsehood, and polytheism, shirk. This is the reason why the wise Quran designates the real scholars, ulama, as the model of piety and fear of God. The principle that ease automatically comes after enduring hardship is also among the teachings of the glorious Quran. Therefore, after passing through numerous stages of piety, there comes a stage in the path of spirituality where piety becomes a living word, i.e., an automatic speaking supreme name, Isme Azam, and causes a personal resurrection or revolution in the spirituality of true moments, which the people of recognition, Ahle Marifat, call the power of Israel, Taqat-e Israeliya. In this regard, the wise Quran says, quote, "Then Allah sent down His peace, Sakina, upon His messenger and upon the believers, and affixed to them the word of piety, Kalimatu Taqwa, and they were worthy of it and entitled to it," unquote. Surah 48, Ayat 26. By the help of Allah, we have explained here some of the fundamental and important points about piety. May God make these points beneficial for the moments. Ameen. The philosophy of belief, Aqidah. Literal analysis. The word Aqidah comes from Aqad, which means knot. Thus, Aqada means to tie a rope, and Aqada means to tie a rope fast. In this sense, Aqidah is used for such religious narrations and traditions which people generally consider correct without properly knowing them. Or we can say that prior to education, research, wisdom, and recognition, the faculty by virtue of which religious matters are believed is known as Aqidah. Aqidah is faith, Iman. It should also be noted that Aqidah is another name of such a faith, Iman, which is primordial in nature and is called to believe, Bavar Karna, in the lexicon. As God says, quote, O you who believe in Allah and His Messenger, unquote. Surah 4, Ayat 136. It asks the people who had earlier accepted the fundamentals of the religion just on the basis of Aqidah, to have faith in the light of realities and recognitions, and to become true moments. Thus, religion demands that in the first stage people should accept the holy sayings and the related traditions of God, the Prophet, and the custodian of divine command by considering those as firm belief, and later they should gradually make their faith perfect in the light of realities and recognitions. Firm belief, Aqidah-i Rasik. People's beliefs are not similar. Rather, they are at different stages. At one end, belief is such that it is practically non-existent, and at the other, it is firm and at the highest rank. Only a person with a firm belief can progress on the path of religion. The firmness and growth of belief is gained through true love and obedience. Thus, those people who are intoxicated with religious love and are the Imam's obedient and firm believers are very fortunate. Only these people can succeed ethically, religiously, and spiritually. And only these are the people who can transform their belief, Aqidah, into perfect faith. Aqidah as a mediator. One should know that Aqidah is the foundation of faith, and perfect faith and firm belief cannot be generated without it. Belief, Aqidah, is the only intermediary through which a person can reach the fountainhead of knowledge, wisdom, and guidance. A person without belief is like a non-existent person, because the concept of the religious existence of a human being can only be correct when he or she has a belief. The foundation of Aqaid, beliefs. Beliefs are established on the foundation of holy sayings of God, the Prophet, and the exalted Imams. Traditions and rituals are essential for the survival of beliefs as they play their part in their explanation. This is so because trivial and minor religious matters are also very important for the existence of Aqidah, and we can understand it through the example of the very delicate branches and thin roots of a fruit-bearing tree. The branches, which bear sweet fruits, seem very weak and insignificant to an ordinary person. Similarly, the roots of a tree, which absorb the elements for its sustenance from the earth, seem so tiny and disarranged that a person without vision may consider those entirely useless. However, the prosperity and growth of a tree depends on these little roots and delicate branches. Respect for Aqaid. A person who does not respect beliefs, despite being secure inside the castle of religion, cannot reach the realities and thus cannot respect them. This is analogous to a child who does not respect his parents at home, does not respect his school teacher at a later stage, and therefore he remains deprived of his teacher's knowledge. Thus, one should know that for a moment the phase of beliefs and rituals is like the nurturing of parents, and the stage of realities and recognition is like the knowledge of a teacher. The danger for aqaid. The biggest danger for beliefs is the concept of atheism. Any contrary concept to our belief can deceive our new generation. Thus, we should take action to protect our beliefs from the influence of atheists and the discourses of outsiders. Otherwise, we stand to lose the great spiritual wealth of belief. Fundamental realities of Islam. Number 1. Islam is the religion of God. Therefore, it is eternally present and established. Surah 9, Ayat 36, Surah 12, Ayat 40, Surah 30, Ayat 30, Surah 30, Ayat 43. In accord with the time, it is called the religion of nature because God has created people according to his nature, i.e., his religion. Surah 30, Ayat 30. To understand the meaning of the religion of nature, one should reflect upon the best example in nature, i.e., a human being who after being born as a little baby progresses through the different stages of life and gradually reaches perfection. In a similar way, Islam gradually passes through different stages of progression, and its light becomes complete and perfect. Surah 9, Ayat 32, Surah 61, Ayat 8. The proof that the light reaches the stage of perfection as a result of Islam's all-embracing progress is that, as the true religion, it will surpass all the other religions of the world. Surah 9, Ayat 33, Surah 61, Ayat 9. Number 2. The Quran teaches that the greatest preacher, supreme guide, and the strongest center of Islam is Prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, and this religion begins from the time of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, Surah 22, Ayat 78. Rather, from one aspect, it commenced at the time of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, Surah 42, Ayat 13, and from another aspect, it is from the period of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, Surah 23, Ayat 51 to 52. Number 3. The light of Islam is one, but its manifestations are different with respect to time and age. Thus, Islam was one in reality, and it was one religion in the time of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. But since the circumstances and demands of these prophets' time and space were different, therefore their shariats and guidance were also different. Number 4. Allah says that the glorious Quran is present in the heavenly books of previous communities. Surah 26, Ayat 196. This does not mean that the wise Quran was narrated in the divine books of the previous prophets with respect to its language and exoteric sense. Rather, it was present in the sense of the spirit, spirituality, light, and esoteric essence of those heavenly books. Thus, in a similar way, the esoteric and inner guidance of the Holy Quran is present in the sacred commands of the Imam of the time. Number 5. The right path which goes to Allah and on which He is accessed is only one, and it is called Islam. The right path, Sirat-e Mustaqim. Hence, Ihdinas Siratal Mustaqim, Surah 1, Ayat 6, teaches to attain God's recognition through knowledge and deeds according to true Islam, and for this first and foremost the mediation of the true guide is required. Number 6. It is evident that the final stage of the path of Islam is God's recognition, Khuda Shanasi, i.e. Marifat, which is actually the stage of salvation as well as the real paradise, and all the prophets invited towards this goal. Number 7. The religion of all the prophets and their purpose of inviting to it is one. Similarly, their book is also one. However, apparently their shariats and their books are different and many. Number 8. The Holy Quran, which is the last book of the Lord of the world, is the compendium of everything. Surah 16, Ayat 89. All the teachings and guidance of the levels of Shariat, Tariqat, Haqiqat, and Marifat are mentioned in it. It is Tanzil as well as Tawil. It is manifest as well as hidden. It is knowledge as well as wisdom. It is the fruit as well as its kernel. Therefore, not only are the commands relating to the past mentioned in its exterior and interior, in fact, it does not lack guidance for the present and the future. However, to see and understand all these things, human beings require the divine light, which is always present in this world along with the Quran. Surah 4, Ayat 174. Number 9. The wise Quran is certainly Allah's guidance. However, not only is its exterior, Tanzil, guidance, its interior, Tawil, is also guidance. According to a prophetic tradition, Hadith, the Quran's hidden meaning is 7 times more than its apparent meaning, and according to another narration, it is 70 times more. There is an abundance of guidance in the glorious Quran, so that the Muslims and the Mu'mins may progress physically and religiously in the light of its guidance, and this is possible only when they read and understand the noble Quran with its living light, Surah 5, Ayat 15, and act according to it. Number 10. Without the Prophet and his vicegerent, no heavenly book can benefit the people, Ummah. Further, the book can never be unaccompanied by a teacher, in any condition or in any time. Thus, it was present in pre-eternity in the divine pen in an intellectual form. Then, it manifested in the spiritual scripture of the divine tablet, then in the spiritual remembrance of Jibril. After that, it descended on the blessed heart of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, and finally, the true vicegerent of the Prophet was nominated as the teacher of the book, and the Quran was entrusted to him. From this, it is evident that the Quran was never alone, nor is it so today, or will it be in the future. Number 11. If to understand the Quran had been an easier matter, and it had not been required to refer to those who are well grounded in knowledge, Rasikun fil ilm, Surah 9, Ayat 7, this would have been the case first for those Muslims who were living in Arabia in the time of the Holy Prophet, since by virtue of its language they were not only very near to the Quran, but it had also descended physically according to the requirements of their circumstances, and as solutions for their problems and necessary guidance for them, etc. Yet it is said to the Prophet, quote, "And we have revealed the Quran to you, that you may make clear to human beings what has been revealed to them," unquote. Surah 16, Ayat 44. Thus, to have the teacher of Quran in all times after the Prophet is indispensable, and that teacher is the Imam of the time. Number 12. In Islam, 2 just witnesses are required to testify to the truthfulness of a claim. Similarly, 2 glorious and eternal miracles are always present in this world as evidence of the truthfulness of the prophethood of the Holy Messenger. One is the Quran, and the other is its teacher, who is appointed by God and the Prophet, i.e., the Imam of the time. These 2 precious things are not only the 2 great and eternal miracles to prove prophethood, they are also the 2 just witnesses to testify to this reality. Number 13. The fundamental words to testify to the oneness of God and the messengership of the Prophet are also 2 and are called Shahadatain. This is so because the veracity and truthfulness of any claim depends upon 2 witnesses. Therefore, 2 just witnesses are always present by virtue of the divine law to affirm the prophethood of the Prophet of Mercy, and they are the sacred Quran and the Imam of the time. Number 14. It is a fact that a prophet possesses the power of miracles. The greatest and the most beneficial miracle is the one which is intellectual and eternal in nature, since only such a miracle is all-embracing and possesses far-reaching results. Therefore, 2 such blessed miracles are present from the time of the Holy Prophet till the resurrection, and they are the Quran and the Imam. Number 15. It is known that the Quran is the first miracle of the Prophet, and that jinn and humankind together are unable to produce such an unprecedented and wisdom-filled book. The true Imam is the Prophet's second miracle. This is in the sense that no individual among the jinn or human beings except the Imam can explain the esoteric wisdom of the Quran, because after the Prophet, it is with the Imam of the time. Thus, no question can arise about the personal miracle of the Imam, since he is himself the miracle of the Prophet. Number 16. Since it is a fact, as mentioned above, that the Imam with the Quran is the living miracle of the Prophet, it is not necessary for the Imam to perform miracles for the common people, just as no Muslim requires a miracle in order to accept the Quran as the divine book. Rather, the Quran is itself a miracle, but one requires the inner eye to see miracles. Number 17. Notwithstanding the above, special people always see the Imam as the locus of manifestation of wonders, Mazharul Ajaib, i.e., they observe his wonders with the heart's eye. These wonders are spread through the stage of imagination to all the stages of true spirituality and Quranic tawils. Thus, these are called intellectual, spiritual, and luminous miracles. Number 18. An unbiased and wise person should check the esoteric books of the Ismaili dignitaries to see the wonderful wisdoms of the wise Quran mentioned in them. What is the source of these magnificent wisdoms? It is the help, ta'in, of the true Imam's holy light. Thus, whoever has relatively more wisdom has the abundant good, Khair Kasir, Surah 2, Ayat 269. And this is the prime objective of the presence of the Quran and the Imam. Number 19. According to the indications of the noble Quran, a great miracle of the holy light of God is that nobody can extinguish it. Thus, Hazrat Imam Hussein alayhis salam's physical martyrdom in Karbala was a failed attempt to extinguish the pure light of God, since according to divine expedience, Allah's light was to remain present and luminous forever. By the command of God, it is living and present now, and will remain so until the resurrection. Number 20. The intellectual and luminous status of the Quran and the Imam is that of God's robe, Surah 3, Ayat 103, and to hold it fast is to act according to the order and command of the Quran and the Imam. It means that the Quran should be obeyed according to the teachings and guidance of the Imam, because he is well grounded, Rasikh, Surah 3, Ayat 7, in Quranic knowledge. Number 21. Reflect on why the light of God's guidance is not symbolized by the sun, although it is a great fountainhead of light. Rather, it is symbolized by a house lamp. This is so because every person cannot observe the sun scientifically, but everyone can reflect on the lamp, how its flame physically remains the same, yet in reality it is being renewed each and every instant. By the supply of fuel, the lamp's light continues forever, and it spreads out as a fountain. This means that the light of knowledge, wisdom, and guidance continues luminously. It moves at lightning speed. It continues like a fountain and never ceases. It is like a discourse which is endless. It is like the rain of light which never stops. It is a living thing and is dynamic. Thus, The light of guidance spreads out as a fresh and renewed light each and every second, which is felt by true moments physically, and its waves run in their hearts and minds. Number 22. All the quotations, matters, and rites of religion which are present among us now existed in the time of Prophet in two forms. Some manifested actually, and some existed potentially, and thus were hidden. Also, there are innumerable things in religion which have appeared after the time of the Prophet, such as the current script of the Holy Quran, its diacritical marks, i'rab, signs and symbols, translations, exegesis, and all other sciences related to it, the current script of hadith, jurisprudence and its principles, imamate, khilafat, Islamic kingdom and related laws, the concepts and beliefs of the people of tariqat, Sufis, and their terminologies and esoteric meanings, ta'wils, and many other sciences and their inventions which are being incorporated in religion after the scientific revolution. For example, telephone, telegram, loudspeaker, radio, newspaper, television, train, motor, airplane, etc. Thus, it is clear that a thing which is invented after the time of the Prophet of Islam, and if it is beneficial form, a religious aspect, it is not prohibited by God and the Prophet, as the exoteric and esoteric guidance of the wise Quran encourages and motivates to strengthen Islam by making use of all permissible and appropriate means. As God says, quote, "And prepare against them what force you can, and horses tied at the frontier, to frighten thereby the enemy of Allah, and your enemy, and others besides them, whom you do not know, but Allah knows them. And whatever thing you will spend in Allah's way, it will be repaid to you fully, and you shall not be treated unjustly." Unquote. Surah 8, Ayat 60. This divine guidance evinces the reality that Muslims of every period should themselves think and decide regarding the progress and strengthening of Islam according to the demands of time, and by assessing the strengths of the enemy, they should decide which power should be used to compete with it. In the above verse, no other thing is mentioned except the preparation of horses, and it is left to the Muslims to use the power they consider most appropriate among intellectual, ethical, spiritual, financial, political, technological, and armament, so that the enemy becomes frightened. This means that in Islam there is but progress, and in this connection there is freedom for beneficial words and deeds, both in a religious and a physical sense. Number 23. Who, according to the Quran, can be good at acting upon its injunctions? They are the people who collectively in the past, present, and future act upon the exoteric as well as the esoteric meaning of the Quran, because it is a unique fruit of paradise with respect to its physical knowledge, and a precious kernel with respect to its inner wisdom. In this example, the maximum benefit is for those who eat the fruit as well as the kernel. Number 24. Every person naturally claims that his path is the right path. However, one should compare who is more pious, because piety is the essence of all worship and matters of religion, and it is the benchmark of religion and faith. Number 25. The Quran says that the religion of Islam is perfect and complete in all aspects. Surah 5, Ayat 3. And it also says that God's physical and hidden bounties are complete. Surah 31, Ayat 20. How is it possible for the Imam of the time, who is the teacher of the Quran and the true guide, to not be available and present? Had that been the case, and the Imam were absent and unavailable, religion would be incomplete, and there would be considerable shortcoming in God's spiritual and intellectual bounties. Number 26. After Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam's demise, all the Muslims agreed upon the necessity of his vicegerent, and it was a separate issue who it should be. Although the problems at that time were limited as compared to now, they agreed that there should be a vicegerent or an imam, either by God's and the Prophet's command or by the decision of their own intellects. In this context, when we have a whole universe of material and religious problems before us, why should there not be an imam today? Number 27. Islam's Shariat is true, but some people judge the matters of tariqat, haqiqat, and marifat on its standard, which is not correct because its standard is dedicated only to it, whereas the standards for the later stages are distinct and different. For example, every judicious Momin knows that there are many conditions ordained for the Shari prayer, namaz, which are not required during the remembrance of God. Number 28. Ismailis are sometimes asked to explain why they are free to go to the mosque, masjid, whenever they wish without any hindrance, whereas non-Ismailis are not permitted to attend Jamaat Khana. The answer is very simple and easy. In Islam, the mosque comes first, which is at the stage of Shariat, and it is for all Muslims. Then there is a Khanqa, which is the stage of Tariqat. Thus, it is not for everyone except for Sufis, and after that there is Jamaat Khana, which is the stage of Haqiqat, and it is specifically for the Ismailis. Thus, until a Muslim becomes a disciple of a sheikh or a murshid of tariqat and takes the oath of allegiance, he cannot enter his khanqa, although they and those outside are both Muslim groups. The same principle applies to a Jamaat Khana. Thus, if we Ismailis go to a mosque, nothing in reality is outside our belief, contrary to which if non-Ismailis go to a Khanqa or Jamaat Khana, they are neither acquainted with its manners and customs, nor do they go there with all its conditions of belief and respect. Thus, if non-Ismailis go to Jamaat Khana, it would be without permission, and in a true sense without reward. Number 29. The exalted Imam is the living light of the pure Quran, and he is the speaking book, Kitab-e-Natik. Thus, he is the proof, Hujjat, of God for people. Thus, there will be no Hujjat on God on the day of resurrection, i.e., no person will be able to say that a guide was not available for him in the world. Number 30. The Prophet of Islam continued to receive the revelation of the wise Quran for 23 years. Thus, some of its verses were abrogated, and their commands were substituted by those mentioned in the new verses, nasikh. During this period, there were amendments in some of the Prophet's ahadith, according to the time. Thus, had the Holy Prophet been physically present until today, certainly there would have been many other changes during these 1400 years, and the same reality is present in the fresh guidance of the Imam of the time. Number 31. The Holy Quran says, quote, O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the Messenger and the Ulul Amr from amongst you. Unquote. Surah 4, Ayat 59. This divine command shows that the Prophet's obedience and that of God are separate. Also, the obedience of Ulul Amr and that of the Prophet are distinct. The obedience of all the ranks is due to their authority and guidance, i.e., the Imam of the time is the possessor of authority after God and the Prophet, which is why he not only directs the guidance of God and Prophet towards the people, but also gives them his own guidance according to the time and space by virtue of his authority. Number 32. Disease can be of a physical nature as well as spiritual. It is worldly as well as religious. Thus, the only cure for all religious and spiritual diseases is love for the Imam of the time, because it is only through this that his true obedience becomes very easy, and the tendency to disobey is removed from a moment's being. Number 33. Why is there disunity in Islam today? Why cannot Muslims be more powerful than other nations? Why are there so many different exegesis of the Quran? Why cannot the Muslim community gather and unite whenever necessary? Alas, if only the Prophet were present, or his true vicegerent had been recognized and obeyed by everyone. Number 34. Allah never asked his robe to encompass the people. Rather, he ordered the people to together hold fast to God's robe. Surah 3, Ayat 103. In this context, the question why they did not recognize the true Imam should be addressed to the people, and the Imam cannot be asked why he did not perform luminous miracles to invite the people. Number 35. Mawla Ali alayhi salam said, "Ask me before you lose me." In this statement, it is clear that some people were going to lose the Imam, and thus the link to ask questions was going to be broken. This shows that people should first accept the Imam, and then they should ask questions. As the Quran says, quote, "If you do not know, then ask the people of zikr," unquote. Surah 16, Ayat 43. Number 36. The holy tree of knowledge, wisdom, and guidance is mentioned in Surah Ibrahim, Surah 14, Ayat 24. This holy tree is the Prophet and the Imam, through whose light the moments always obtain the fruit of external and internal guidance. Thus, in Islam, the Imam of the time is the evergreen tree after the noble Prophet. Number 37. The glorious Quran says, quote, "And to Allah belong all the beautiful names, i.e., great names, so call Him by them," unquote. Surah 7, Ayat 180. According to a saying of Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, the Imams are the beautiful names, i.e., the great names of God. Thus, the Imam of the time is the living supreme name of Allah, and to call Allah through him is the most excellent worship. Number 38. Many self-proclaimed teachers, being unable to explain the present reality to their followers, occupy them with the stories of the past, so that in the darkness of their imaginations everything appears astonishing and amazing to them, to the extent that they stop the process of questioning and reflection. Number 39. All religious commands from the time of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam till the resurrection are of two types. One are those in which there cannot be any amendment, and the others are the ones in which there can be modification at appropriate times, so that relevance and suitability according to time and space can be achieved. Number 40. The beginning and ending of religion is the oneness, Tawheed, of Allah. It means that the first thing in Islam is the acceptance and belief in the oneness of God, and finally, the recognition of God's oneness should be known as the result of all the religious words and deeds. Our Tawheed is the one which is mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith, and the same is stated by Hazrat Maulana Imam Ali alayhi salam in his splendid book Nahjul Balagha. The real recognition of the same Tawheed has been emphatically ordered by our holy Imams. Our religious dignitaries have explained this same Tawheed in the language of philosophy, wisdom, and ta'wil, as it is evident from the famous book Rahatul Aql by Sayyidina Hamiduddin Kirmani, Qaddasallahu Sirrahu, and the teachings